Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I'm here with Dr. Laurell, and today we're going to talk about depression fatigue and what is it, and how do we really want to work with it? Why do we get into that place of low energy, fatigued? We just feel really wiped out. And right now, I would say most people are feeling a bit tired. And this goes beyond, though, just being tired. It's when we wake up even tired because of all the things that we've been going through. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Laurell and see how she works with this with her patients. And then maybe I'll chime in a few ideas of how I work with depression fatigue. So hello, Dr. Laurell. It's great to see you here again.
You too. Thank you. And yes, this is a very important topic to talk about. We both work with women in our age range who are getting a little bit older. And what I often find is I describe these women as the worn out superwoman. They've spent so many years of their life raising kids or caring for others, such as aging parents or a spouse, but putting a lot of the focus of their life on others while also working a full-time job or more and all of their other, so they just spent years trying to do their best and be it all for everyone. And they have reached a stage of depletion where they're worn out, they're tired, they're deficient on multiple levels and needing to be nourished, especially with time for themselves.
I'm finding that more now, even within myself, I have to watch the energy fields of how I'm feeling. And, one of the first things that I've noticed within my own lifestyle change is not getting on social media. I
Hmm.
find just not doing that, the amount of energy that I get just from not depleting. You use the word we're doing for others so much, everything is outside of us instead of, and I call it bring the mind back home, bringing the mind back to the self. That's the whole meditative shift, bringing it back. Don't leak, because we're leaking with all of
Hmm.
these demands, and we can actually train ourselves in many ways to bring our mind back to ourselves and not, you could still do the same tasks, but you don't get depleted the same way. But we've talked in the past about, and of course we have the physicality of it. And we talked about thyroid, we talk about adrenal function, we talk about gut. So all of those do come into play. This is not just one way or the other. So can you just highlight a couple of things maybe that would be useful for people to, really embrace in moving through fatigue? And we all know it's not just one thing. It's
Yes.
just not
Yeah.
one thing. But and then
Yeah,
I'll, yeah,
absolutely.
yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead.
And you name some of those key underlying issues because as we age, more of these other body systems are stressed. So it is important to check in on the thyroid and think about gut health. But as far as this kind of fatigue that we're feeling from being so depleted, some of it is that people haven't taken time for themselves for things, basic nourishing things. They're sometimes feeding their kids better than they're feeding themselves, because they're just kind of rushing their own meals or even not taking the time to sit and be able to calmly chew the food to get optimal nourishment. So, carving out some more care time for yourself can be extremely important. And, sometimes it's making decisions like to uh, go to sleep earlier or doing some other things to improve sleep quality because your brain's just like rushing with all these things on your to-do list. And sometimes you have to uh, add some more calming techniques or figure out how to shut down that overactive mind so you can get some high quality rest.
The mind is the source of happiness and source of misery at the same time. So I've always emphasized, and where the work I do now is, how do we train our mind to be still? And
Mm-hmm.
even if you have a schedule in which you're taking care of elderly parents, you're taking care of pets, you're taking care of children, taking care of a partner, whatever that may be, these factors will always exist. It's if it's not one thing, as we say, it's another. What
Yes.
we really need to learn to do, and this is what life's training is all about, what we really need to be doing is to work with ourselves in such a way to understand the principles that how our energy is released and we get what is depression. Depression is when we've exhausted all our circuits, we've exhausted ourselves
Mm-hmm.
with either too much food, too little food, too much exercise, too much talking on the phone, too much social media, too much, too much,
Mm-hmm.
too much. Then the systems become depleted, we get into a depressed state, and then to rebuild that is not something overnight with one pill. It's not, again, drinking the caffeine. And as women change, and that's what we were talking about, the estrogen levels change and other hormones, of course. So we don't have that buffer that we did when we were in our 40s and 30s. That buffer was in place for when we have families and children. We can sustain certain things, but now it requires to seal the leaks, as I always say, maintain flow and
Mm-hmm.
build a reserve. And that requires systematic training, proper care, medical care, practitioner care like yourself, getting in the guidelines of where are we depleted, where are we not, what do we need to sustain and nourish ourselves, as well as working with a lifestyle change. You have to work with your mind, no matter how you look at it. We spend so much time working with our bodies, or we spend time on our hair, our face, whatever it is. How much time do we spend on this instrument called mind? And this instrument needs to be fine-tuned. Otherwise, it can really, it'll go, it's trained, its essence is to be outward driven. And when it's outward driven, it drains the field. So you have to learn to bring it in and bring it back to the self. And once you learn to do that and see the difference between who you are and working with this mind field, it's not just thinking, it has nothing to do with that. But working with the field of energy, then we could start masterfully programming our life. And even with
Mm-hmm.
food, you could have all the best supplements and foods in the world, but if your mind is in constant worry and hurry, it's going to drain that which you're bringing into yourself. So
Mm-hmm.
that's the way I like to work with people. It's, diet is one thing. We both work with diet and we work with many things. But I find that really the body has to be settled down enough in order to really start assimilating that nourishment that you so rightly said. We have to be able to nourish ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and I really like your description of finding the leaks and stopping the leaks because
Yeah.
as we're getting older, we don't necessarily have the same level of resilience that we did when we were younger, as you said, with the hormonal changes that happen, we don't have those buffer. That was so well put. And so we just have to be a little more aware of these issues and kind of give ourselves some space and give ourselves some grace, to be a healthier version of ourselves and think about what really nourishes us. Is it in addition to high quality foods and bring beneficial supplements like our omega-3s or turmeric, is it what else nourishes us? Is it high quality social connections? Is it being in nature? So finding times for those types of nourishment. For instance, last night I made myself I live outside of a very small town, but someone started uh a social group for female business owners in my community. So I made
Oh,
myself
real
go to their
nice.
social mixer last night and knew no one there at all, but met some new people, made some new social connections, so it was something that I was doing for myself by seeking out women who might be able to support my journey.
You know, it's really interesting you brought all of those things up. Nourishment is more than just taking a supplement. We use the word supplement, and some people rely on that, but it's really about, you said, social connection. And I'm getting ready to start a women's group that we can get together and have the connections we need from the nourishment perspective. It's really about nourishing our soul, nourishing ourselves, but also at the same time keeping the body healthy. You know, the body is part of this whole picture as well as the mind. They're both one and the same. The mind is just a subtle version of what the body is. The body is the manifestation of what goes on in the mind. And so when we work with all of that and we really understand that, so it was well said how you nourish yourself in many different ways. And nature for me, like you say, we always talk about that. Nature is the primary nourisher for my sense of being. And without that, it can be very, very difficult. But I also think I think social media could be wonderful. I think iPhones are wonderful, smartphones or whatever they call them. All of those phones are just wonderful how we connect, but it will never, just like AI, will never replace the human connection. We are human beings for a reason, and that cannot be replaced. We can try to do that when destroy the human condition, but ultimately, nature, which is the human condition, will surpass any of it. And that's the way I look at it. And so what I would say to people who really want to work with depression fatigue, that low energy that just doesn't leave, really get yourself get yourself someone if you can't do it. And most people can't do it themselves because it's a whole picture. Get yourself on a good nutritional program with supplements when needed, if needed. Get yourself into a stress management program and really take the time, take this next year and really dive deep within yourself to nourish every aspect of your being. It will be worth it. It'll be worth it because whatever you do in this decade will be a representation of how you live your next decade. If we're all privileged to live those decades, it's never immediate. So pay attention and pay attention to the thoughts that you have floating through your mind field because they will nourish you or create those little holes in the dike that deplete you. So that's all I have to say for this session. Do you have anything else you'd like to add before we close it up?
No, I think that was so well put. You know, as you said, it's even as we age, we can still
Right.
improve our health, you know, so there's still opportunities. So take some time for yourself.
Yeah, and as I always say, one step at a time to transform yourself. We're all in this transformation phase, and now the way things are collectively is the most wonderful opportunity to do that. So until next time, everyone, we'll look forward to hearing your questions and concerns because our content is based on what you write in or I've had some texting, whatever way you want to get in touch with us, it'll be in the show notes. We'd be delighted to hear from you. And thanks again for joining us and see you again.